Mr. Hine,
Yes.
Mrs. Appleby. Here. Mr. Hettinger,
Here.
Mr. Morris,
Here.
Mr. Munson,
Here.
Mr. Mikeworth,
Here.
and Mr. Glenn.
Here. May I have a motion to approve the November 29th and December 3rd special meetings and the November 21st regular board meeting minutes?
So moved.
Mr. Henninger,
I'd second.
second by Mr. Glenn.
There's a motion on the floor by Mr. Hettinger, seconded by Mr. Glenn, to approve the minutes of the November 29th and December 3rd special meetings and the November 21st regular board meeting.
Discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Appleby?
Yes.
Mr. Hettinger?
Yes.
Mr. Morris?
Yes.
Mr. Munson?
Yes.
Mr. Mikeworth?
Yes.
Mr. Glenn?
Yes.
And Mr. Hine.
Yes. There are no transfers or emergency appropriations. May I have a motion to approve the payments of the county's financial obligations?
So moved.
Morris. Second, Mr. Pond.
There's a motion on the floor by Mr. Morris, seconded by Mr. Hine, to approve the payments of the county's financial obligations.
Discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Hettinger? Mr. Morris?
Here.
Mr. Munson?
Yes.
Mr. Mikeworth?
Yes.
Mr. Glenn?
Yes.
Mr. Hine?
Yes.
And Mrs. Appleby.
Yes.
May I have a motion to approve the reports of fees of the county offices?
So moved.
Mrs. Appleby. Second, Mr. Morris. Second.
There's a motion on the floor by Mrs. Appleby, seconded by Mr. Morris, to approve the reports of fees of county offices. I'm ahead of myself.
Discussion. Roll call.
Mr. Morris?
Yes.
Mr. Munson?
Yes.
Mr. Mikeworth?
Yes.
Mr. Glenn?
Yes.
Mr. Hine?
Yes.
Mrs. Appleby?
Yes.
And Mr. Hettinger.
Yes.
Mr. Hettinger, would you present item 8, please?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to appoint Vivi Appleby as Douglas County Board Representative to the Douglas County Board of Health.
Is there a second?
I would second.
Mr. Glenn seconds.
There's a motion on the floor by Mr. Hettinger, seconded by Mr. Glenn, to appoint Vivi Appleby as Douglas County Board Representative to the Douglas County Board of Health.
Discussion? Roll call.
Mr. Munson?
Yes.
Mr. Mikeworth?
Yes.
Mr. Glenn?
Yes.
Mr. Hine?
Yes.
Mrs. Appleby?
Abstain.
Mr. Hettinger?
Yes.
And Mr. Morris.
Yes. Mr. Mikeworth, would you present item 9, please?
Most certainly, Mr. Chairman. I move that we approve Resolution 18-R-33, stating that the Board Chairman of the Douglas County Board hereby authorizes the cancellation of the appropriate certificate of purchase for parcel 02-07-14-200-200.
Is there a second?
I'd second.
Mr. Glenn, second.
There's a motion on the floor by Mr. Mikeworth, seconded by Mr. Glenn, to approve Resolution 18-R-33, stating that the Board Chairman of the Douglas County Board hereby authorizes the cancellation of the appropriate certificate of purchase for parcel number 02-07-14-200-200.
Discussion. Roll call, please.
Mr. Mikeworth?
Yes.
Mr. Glenn?
Yes.
Mr. Hine?
Yes.
Mrs. Appleby?
Yes.
Mr. Hettinger?
Yes.
Mr. Morris?
Yes.
And Mr. Munson.
Yes. Mr. present item 10.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. Motion to approve Resolution 18R34 stating that the Smart Watt Energy Incorporated is hereby authorized to release the requested qualifications on behalf of the Douglas County Board upon final review and approval to the document by the state's attorney and Douglas County Board.
Is there a second? Mr. Morris, seconds.
There's a motion on the floor by Mr. Hines, seconded by Mr. Morris, to approve Resolution 18-R-34, stating that Smart Watt Energy Incorporated is hereby authorized to release the request for qualifications on behalf of the Douglas County Board upon final review and approval of the document by the state's attorney and the Douglas County Board.
Discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Glenn?
Yes.
Mr. Hines?
Yes.
Mrs. Appleby?
Yes.
Mr. Hettinger?
Yes.
Mr. Morris?
Yes.
Mr. Munson?
Yes.
And Mr. Myquart?
Yes.
Mr. Glenn, would you present item 11?
No, certainly. Judy,
That's
that's
35.
35.
Uh-huh.
Mr. Chairman, I move that county maintenance resolution 18-R-35 appropriating $385,075 in motor fuel tax refunds or funds, be approved as recommended by the Road and Bridge Committee and the county engineer.
Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Hines, seconds.
There's a motion on the floor by Mr. Glenn, seconded by Mr. Hine, that the county maintenance resolution 18-R-35 appropriating $385,075 in motor fuel tax funds be approved as recommended by the Road and Bridge Committee and the county engineer.
Discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Hine?
Yes.
Mrs. Appleby?
Yes.
Mr. Hettinger?
Yes.
Mr. Morris?
Yes.
Mr. Munson?
Yes.
Mr. Myquart?
Yes.
And Mr. Glenn?
Yes.
Mr. Morris, would you present item 12, please?
Mr. Chairman,
I think, Mr. Morris, it will suffice since we have copies of this available. If you just want to read the total of the budget, that will be fine.
okay, Mr. Chairman, Resolution 18-R-36 to approve fiscal year budget levy and appropriations in the amount of $4,443,000.
Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Hettinger, seconds.
There's a motion on the floor by Mr. Morris, seconded by Mr. Hettinger, to approve Resolution 18-R-36 to adopt fiscal year 2019 budget appropriations and levies for a total of $4,443,000.
Discussion. Roll call.
Mrs. Appleby?
Yes.
Mr. Hettinger?
Yes.
Mr. Morris?
Yes.
Mr. Munson?
Yes.
Mr. Myquart?
Yes.
Mr. Glenn?
Yes.
And Mr. Hine?
Yes.
Mr. Hettinger, would you present item 13, please?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion at the recommendation of the Budget and Finance Subcommittee to the Douglas County Board to approve the contract with Zurcher
Zerker, I think.
Zerker
Zerker, I think.
Technologies for computer-aided dispatch, CAD, once the following criteria has been met: receipt of the final contract approval of contract by the state attorney, securing a financing plan, and 9/11
if he would like to make any comment concerning that.
Sure.
I don't think you need to tell us all the
No.
details, but
So the 911 board, I'll do a brief synopsis. Basically, I'm asking to replace our computer-aided dispatch, the software that we use to dispatch all emergency services in Douglas County. It also is the software that we use to write our reports. What we have now is over 14 years old. It's running into a lot of complications, so it'd be better to make our office more efficient. This purchase would better enhance our services that we can offer to Douglas County. The 911 board has agreed to pay a portion of the total cost of this software, and I have put money in my budget that will help cover the expense of it as well over the course of time. So it would not be an added or additional request for money. It's been some of the funding has been moved around from operational changes. Does that help, Mr. Chairman?
that's fine. I might add, I know you mentioned some complications, and they are very disturbing when the dispatchers are sitting there and all of a sudden their screen goes blank and they cannot view from one screen to the other, and it's time.
Absolutely, yeah. We've run into that, and also the inability to have technical services. If we do have an issue, it can take up to 24 hours before someone's able to actually come in and fix it when it's out of the control of our IT personnel on staff. So this would provide us the ability to have access to 24-hour technical support, and a lot of the issues that we have now over the course, once we go online with this, would diminish or go away altogether. So,
And I also understand that that this system would be available for our police agencies and our county cities and villages to be able to also use.
That's correct. They would have the opportunity to purchase the software that would tie into ours, which would allow us to share reports, share information on people that we come in contact with, share information on vehicles that we come in contact with, as well as allows our dispatch center to do what we call silent dispatching, or in other words, it gives us another tool to send officers to call, say if the radio's tied up for an emergency, and the officers aren't able, and the dispatchers aren't able to get on there, they can actually dispatch them over the mobile. So the communication that we have with them will be much more prevalent than what we have now. And also, like I said, the information sharing as far as our investigations go will greatly enhance our ability to do some joint investigations together.
Any questions to the sheriff? Thanks.
Thank you, Chairman.
Need a second? Need a second? There's a motion on the floor by Mr. Hettinger, seconded by Mr. Hine, at the recommendation of the Budget and Finance Subcommittee to the Douglas County Board to approve the contract with Zucker Technologies for computer-aided dispatch, CAD, once the following criteria has been met: receipt of the final contract, approval of contract by the state's attorney, securing a financing plan, and 911 board's final approval.
I got the cart ahead of the horse.
That's okay. You're good. You're good.
You want to give all that over again?
Sorry about that. Roll call, please.
Mr. Hettinger?
Yes.
Mr. Morris?
Yes.
Mr. Munson?
Yes.
Mr. Mikeworth?
Yes.
Mr. Glenn?
Yes.
Mr. Hines?
Yes.
And Mrs. Appleby?
Yes.
Mr. Hunt?
Yes, sir.
Present 14.
The recommendation, based on the recommendation of the Douglas County Sheriff, the Douglas County Board agrees that the sheriff shall keep his office open and attend to the duties thereof from 8 o'clock in the forenoon to 4 o'clock in the afternoon in such working days, excepting such days and half-days as under the law are in many illegal holidays and half-holidays.
Is there a second?
I'd second.
Mr. Glenn seconds.
There's a motion on the floor by Mr. Hines, seconded by Mr. Glenn. Based on the recommendations of the Douglas County Sheriff, the Douglas County Board agrees that the sheriff shall keep his office open and attend to the duties thereof from 8 o'clock in the forenoon to 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and each working day, excepting such days and half-days as under the law are or may be legal holidays or half-holidays.
Discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Morris?
Yes.
Mr. Munson?
Yes.
Mr. Micworth?
Yes.
Mr. Glenn?
Yes.
Mr. Hine?
Yes.
Mrs. Appleby?
Yes.
And Mr. Hettinger?
Yes.
Item 15 is going to be stricken, that
We
will
need
come up.
to table that for a few months. We're just a little ahead of the time frame. Correct, Josh?
That's correct.
Is there any new business? That must be new business. Okay. Are there any questions from the press or from visitors?
My name is Charles Thomas. I'm a resident of Murdoch Township. I have a comment, I have a question. The citizens of Newman and Murdoch Township became aware of this wind farm, this industrial wind farm, imminently coming to our townships. We saw the moratorium from the board, which was denied, and each township subsequently established zoning committees to establish their own zoning ordinances. And my question is, does the Douglas County Board and the Enforcement Division of the Douglas County recognize the Murdoch Township zoning ordinance?
If you're addressing that to us at this point, I think we will take that question and refer it to our state attorney, because I personally cannot answer you unless they ask me.
That's all.
Will that be okay? Who do we need to address that to?
Well, I think,
If you want it to yourself, that's fine. If you want it to somebody else, like,
I think Murdoch Township's
okay,
zoning officer.
okay. If you could supply,
I think
our,
she's met Bob out.
okay, very good, very good. Is that okay, Kate?
Yes.
And I have a comment if that's all right.
Pardon me?
I have a comment if that's all
Oh,
right.
very, sure, go right ahead.
Since this is all taking place, we've got an open pit on the borderline between Newman Township and Murdoch Township that's not compliant as far as distance and depth. We've seen 9 miles of our road damaged, subsequently repaired. The timeline, whether that was hold up during the weather, well, remains to be seen. And then we've had another pit that was dug and it's been filled in Camargo Township. And all this is done in EDV's behalf to expedite construction of the switchyard. And I want everyone to know that as an indirect result, the county has suffered a tragedy within the last 2 weeks. 2 deaths and 1 injury. And I think that will conclude my statement.
Thank you. Are there any other comments? Yes, sir.
Yeah, first of all, the board looks very nice today. I appreciate the fact that you allowed me to speak at the last meeting and to request a chance to send you some information I sent that out to the board members. I did receive one response, and I appreciate that very much. Only heard from one board member on the way back. I would be willing to send more information if the board is open to it. I appreciate the fact that we all look at trying to keep our minds open to both sides of this issue, but I think there are things that possibly you've not been aware of. And if you want more information, I will be glad to send it to you. If I'm wasting my time, and you're not open to hearing some of those arguments, then I'm not going to waste my time or the efforts of the other people. Would you be open to more information? First of all, did you receive the information from me? Okay, thank you.
I did.
And you did look at it?
Yeah.
Did you review it? So you understand a little bit better some of our arguments, especially in terms of the health aspects of this project, right? And the outcomes of some of the huge wind turbines that we're seeing. Wind turbines that we've not seen before, that you can already see some of the impacts that the smaller turbines have had. And that's all I ask, and I appreciate that. And if you're open to having more information, I'll be glad to send it your way. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
I'm a bit of a nervous speaker, so I'm going to read what I wrote. My name is Nancy Allen, and I live in Newman Township. I have a few simple questions with comment for the board members, but I will exclude the newly seated member and also Mrs. Appleby, since she was the only board member who voted yes for a moratorium, and thank you for that. Apparently, she must agree that taking more time to investigate all aspects of the proposed EDPR industrial wind turbine complex was the right thing to do. To take time to gather more information, updated and current information that would be current and for the much larger turbines now being proposed. My question is this, and any one of you may answer, and I really am looking for an answer for this. Do you know how big the turbines are that EDPR is now planning to put across the farmland of Newman and Murdoch Townships? Do any of you know the height? Can you tell me?
600.
All right, 596 feet. Can any of you visualize the size of that? The Douglas County Courthouse is 45 feet tall. The Washington Monument is 555 feet tall. And these will only be 34 feet shorter than the Gateway Arch in St. Louis. Do you know the rotor diameter? The blades turning, the diameter of them turning. It is 492 feet. The same length as the turbines that are on the California Ridge, as tall as they are, the ones that are on the California Ridge Wind Complex up near Royal and St. Joe. The rotors will be almost as wide as 2 football fields. Just imagine 48 to 50 of these things being placed only 1,000 feet from the foundation of a residence. There was no mention of size when all the lease agreements and good neighbor agreements were signed months ago. Do any of you know what ILFN is? No? Infrasound low frequency noise. It is extremely harmful to the pathology of the human body and is now being found that it also affects birds, animals, and livestock. It is too much to go into on this time that I've been given here, but it is emitted by these industrial wind turbines and it travels for miles. It would be worth your time to research this for the health and safety of your constituents. Because you, and I take this as a quote from someone else, like Pilot, washed your hands of this. You forced the township to make their own zoning ordinances. A majority of Newman Township resident voters showed their concern regarding this issue. You have consistently rebuffed these concerns and also the health and safety of your constituents by ignoring the many emails, signed petitions, letters, phone calls, photographs, face-to-face conversations, and much research information that was shared with all of you, trying to defend our position against EDPR's continuing attempt to bully and buy its way through Douglas County. But at what cost? Gentlemen, be careful what you wish for. This will be your legacy. And it seems now, just like Judas, you have betrayed your people for 30 pieces of silver. Thank you.
Any questions from the press? Sir, your topic, please.
My topic is the board's responsibility in the wind farm ordinances and the support for that project. I have 2 points to address, Mr. Chairman. Number one, although I am significantly removed from the civic classes in the high school from which I graduated in 1965, I believe that the flow of governmental authority and governance in this state goes from the state legislature to the various counties. I therefore believe that this county board is the appropriate organization to establish ordinances, plans, directives, control of aspects within the county area. I believe that you have the priority in addressing those matters over the priority of the townships, and I support the continued efforts of this board to supervise this wind farm project. My name is Richard Wax. I own property in 4 townships, 4 of the 9 townships in Douglas County. All of my farmland in Murdoch and Newman Township is within the footprint of the wind farm. I state my support for that wind farm for 3 reasons. Number one, this nation needs energy. We are currently producing a tremendous amount of energy from burning fossil fuel, and while opinions differ on whether there is global warming or not, common sense, which is not too common anymore, simply argues that the burning of fossil fuel, the pollution of the atmosphere of the ground, is not an enduring and lengthy project that we can continue to support. The second issue, this wind farm will use a renewable natural resource at no cost to us, but it will require infrastructure to convert that resource, wind, into electrical power. No tax assessor with his or her salt will miss the opportunity to assess taxes on that infrastructure. And while opinions differ on the value of the tax revenue that this project will generate, the fact is tax revenue will be generated, which will have two positive outcomes. Number one, the immediate tax relief could be granted to citizens because of the influx of new tax revenues. And number two, additional tax increases in the future to support the growing needs of the infrastructure of the county, education of our children, matters of that can be reduced from the addition of this tax revenue. The third point, this project will create employment opportunities both in the short term and the long term within an economically depressed area. Farming isn't the same in Douglas County as it was when I was a boy working on my father's farm as I grew up. We have no livestock, in essence. We have no fenced areas. We have no chicken coops that provide the chicken for Sunday afternoon dinner following church. We have no hay crops, no pasture. Agriculture has changed. We're not pulling a corn picker behind a tractor or using a 2-row corn picking machine. We're now using huge equipment to farm large tracts of land. My tenants are concerned about the farming arrangements that they're going to have to go around to farm around turbines should we have any on our land. But they have agreed that the overall net benefit of this project is worth that effort. I state my support for the wind project. I urge the board to continue its support of this viably, economically needed project. Thank you.
Anybody else? Sir?
I just want to say, I have chickens, I have pasture, I have animals on my land.
Sir, if you would, you have
Sorry?
spoken. You have spoken.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other business? Any need for an executive session?
Here.
Sir, are you in charge of this meeting or am I?
Well, you're evidently not, you're not paying attention. You're looking that way, and she's back here.
That's right, sir. The time has passed for the comment period. Thank you. Mr. Glenn, seeing none, I will entertain your motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion for adjournment to January 16th of 2019 at 9 o'clock in the morning.
Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Ettinger, second.
There's a motion on the floor by Mr. Glenn, seconded by Mr. Hedinger at 9 5:30 a.m., there being no further business to come before the county board, to adjourn to January 16, 2019 at 9 a.m.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Mike Worth?
Yes.
Mr. Glenn?
Yes.
Mr. Hine?
Yes.
Mrs. Appleby?
Yes.
Mr. Henninger?
Yes.
Mr. Morris?
Yes.
And Mr. Munson?
Yes. Meeting is adjourned.
Merry Christmas, my friends. I don't see you.